"You are the family disgrace," Rick screamed. "Get out, now!" His voice hit me before the front door even stopped rattling from the force he used to open it. The cold November air slipped in behind him, sharp enough to make my eyes water, even though I refused to blink. He grabbed my backpack from the chair and threw it toward the porch. My phone was inside, so the sound it made on the wood was a dull thud, like something expensive breaking in slow motion. My mother stood behind him, pressed against the refrigerator, her hands twisted in the hem of her sweater. She did not say my name. She did not even look at me. She stared at the floor like she had been given instructions. Then my phone lit up inside the bag. I saw the screen glow white through the fabric just long enough to show a notification. Outgoing wire $45,000 to Erica Harden, timestamped 9:03 p.m. Rick grinned with half his mouth and raised the Bluetooth speaker on the counter. He tapped his phone and a FaceTime group popped up. 4 aunts, 2 cousins, 1 neighbor he always invited to pretend he had friends. He held the phone toward me. "Say goodbye to the parasite," he told them. "The little leech is finally out of this house." Someone on the call laughed too loud. Someone else said good riddance. My mother pressed harder into the wall like she hoped she would disappear into it. Rick pointed at the dining table. There was a printed seating chart spread out in neat rows for his 60th birthday party tomorrow night at the Knights of Columbus Hall. Cream paper, gold border, 26 guests. At the top of the second table where my name used to be, there was a thick red line through Jenna. It was not crossed out. It was carved like he had dragged the marker until the ink bled. The marker lay beside the chart without its cap. He must have crossed me out right before he opened the door. I stepped forward and picked up my bag. Rick followed, blocking the hallway so I could not go to my old room. "Not welcome," he said. "Not tonight. Not ever." The Bluetooth speaker echoed him. "Not welcome, not ever." One cousin snorted and said, "I should have thought about that before trying to take money that was not mine." I never touched $1 of anything that belonged to him, but I did not waste breath telling that room of digital faces. Breath is expensive when it is wasted. I unzipped the side pocket of my backpack and pulled out my phone. I opened the wire notification again and took a screenshot. Then another. Then a slow zoom on the timestamp. He noticed. "Yeah, go ahead," he barked. "Collect pictures. Everybody knows you are a thief. Everybody knows you are the shame of this family." My mother's chin trembled. She still did not speak. My pulse was steady and slow, as if my body knew something my mind had not caught up to. I walked toward the door. Rick followed so closely I could feel the heat of his breath on my shoulder. As I stepped onto the porch, a white sedan pulled up to the curb. A man in a light jacket got out and walked up the steps with a folder in his hand. "Delivery for Patricia Harden," he said. Rick snatched the envelope before my mother moved. He tore it open right there. The page read, "Notice of HELOC draw $90,000 signed by Patricia Harden." But the signature curved in the exact crooked style Rick used. He froze for just a second before he caught himself and barked a laugh, loud and fake. "Paperwork," he said. "Just paperwork." My phone shook again. A text from Aunt Linda appeared. "Probate clerk flagged irregularities. Call me." I stared at the message until every letter settled into its place. I remembered the stack of statements I'd been collecting, the transfers disguised as house repairs, the 529 plans sold off in pieces. The CD changed quietly. The insurance money for a funeral turned into a flat screen. Rick leaned close enough for his shoulder to touch mine. "No one believes you," he whispered. "No one will help you." I stepped down onto the walkway. I zipped my coat. I lifted my phone and took a picture of the signed HELOC notice still in his hand. He tried to jerk it away, but I did not need the paper. I already had the evidence. "You have no idea what I do for a living," I said. It came out calm, almost soft, not a threat, a fact. I walked to my car without looking back. The Bluetooth speaker inside the house spat out one more insult, something about a leech and a burden. I closed my door and started the engine. My phone lit up one more time. Another transfer. Another leak of money leaving the accounts my grandfather trusted this family to protect. I rested my hands on the steering wheel and let the cold silence fill the car. I felt shame once in this driveway. That night, there was only clarity. If you have lived toxic family or family betrayal, comment, still here. March 2023 was the month the ground went quiet. My grandfather Caleb passed in his sleep and the house smelled like black coffee and cedar drawers. After the small funeral, my mother unfolded a short letter he had written in his blocky hand. It read, "For Jenna School or home." No flourish and no speech, just a line that felt like a hand on my shoulder. We cataloged what he had set aside in a cigar box in a manila folder. A 529 plan with $82,600, a certificate of deposit with $12,000, and a burial insurance policy for $18,000 meant to keep arguments out of the funeral home. Nothing fancy, just the bones of a life built steadily. Rick stood close to the desk and said he would hold the papers so Mom would not get overwhelmed. He said probate clerks lose things and he knew a guy at the bank. I did not argue because grief is a fog, and I thought goodwill would be enough. I took phone photos of everything because habit never leaves you once you work in risk. Spring turned to the humid patience of Ohio summer and the house creaked by May 2024. The roof drip turned into a story Rick told at every cookout. He said shingles were failing and a storm had ripped a seam. He said contractors needed deposits, and the 529 plan would just sit there while Jenna chased a degree. She would never finish. He said it with a laugh and a shrug. I asked which company was doing the work, and he waved a hand. He said Edgewater Roofing. Everyone uses them. I nodded, and later that night I pulled their public job board and service calendar. There was nothing tied to our address, no intake, no estimate. No ticket and risk operations. You do not fall in love with a story. You follow the odd numbers until they point in the same direction. I traced the 529 distribution codes in the plan portal and matched timestamps to a bank account. Only Rick could move money through because he had convinced my mother to list him as the helpful contact. The withdrawal memo said emergency roof repair in a neat typed line that did not belong to my mother. I flagged it in a spreadsheet with a bright note. My job makes me clinical. I live in ACH rails and NACHA guides, and the small codes that tell a bank whether a transaction walked in the front door or slipped through the side gate. I know what R06 means returned for wrong account number. I know what an RDFI can and cannot do. I know the shape of a lie when it leaves a money trail that repeats the same pattern. June pushed sweat through the neighborhood, and Rick slapped backs and said he had taken care of it. He told me not to worry my pretty head, and I smiled because people who steal small think details are decoration. That same week, Erica posted a photo from a rooftop in Nashville with a caption about new beginnings and a cocktail glass held up to a pale sky. The timestamp matched the day the 529 money left. I saved the photo and every comment below it because receipts are not just numbers. They are timelines with faces. When I showed my mother quietly over iced tea, she flinched and said, "We should not make waves." I heard the old fear in her voice and filed it away. In July, I saw a small outbound test transaction hit the checking account and bounce back a kind of ping that tells you someone is mapping the fence line in August. Another 529 draw went out with a fresh emergency tag I called Edgewater Roofing and asked for a work order by address. The receptionist put me on hold, then came back and said nothing was scheduled. I asked to speak to a manager and left my number. No one called. The pattern was now a circle drawn in red. Meanwhile, Rick kept pressing into the house like smoke. He carried folders he never opened and wore a helpful smile that asked to be thanked. When I reminded him the 529 was for school or a home, his eyes flattened and he said, "Family has to be flexible." I wrote down the sentence because cadence matters when you retell a theft to a judge. Small revenge keeps you level while you build the larger turn. He had attached his email to my streaming accounts the way a vine attaches to a fence. So on a Thursday, before his football watch party, I removed his profile from my Netflix and cut Hulu and changed the password on Prime. I watched from my car across the street as guests arrived with dip and paper plates. I saw his living room dim and brighten as he jabbed at remotes. He walked out to the driveway with his phone held high for a better signal and pretended to laugh. Humiliation is a kind of mirror. He looked into it and saw himself, and then he saw me watching, and he pretended not to. That night, I pulled a year of bank statements and laid them across my dining table like tiles. A Best Buy run at $6,800, Home Depot at $15,600, golf membership at $12,000, a Vegas resort weekend at $3,900, 2 watches at $6,300. None of it matched the roof that never got fixed. The burial policy paid out and vanished into the same fog. I printed the statements and marked each line with a pen. I do not shake when I underline. In September, Mom handed me a quitclaim deed, signed in May, that slid half the house to Rick. She said he told her it would simplify things. The notary stamp was real, but the timing was not the deed, folded nicely into a story about a HELOC that appeared in July for $9,000. When a credit line arrives so quickly, you should always look at who held the pen. I ran my finger along the signature. The J in Patricia had a new tilt that matched the way Rick writes his R. I kept my tone even and asked Mom whether she had read the page fully. She looked away and said she trusted him. Trust is a dimmer, not a switch. You turn it without noticing, and then the room is dark. I wrote to the title company that had handled the recording and issued a litigation hold notice on behalf of a potential interested party. It was a dry email, and it carried enough weight to slow movement. The next morning, Erica posted another photo holding a shopping bag and a caption about earned, not given. I took a quiet breath and wrote the date under the image that weekend. I removed Rick from my Amazon household so the paper towels and razors he had counted on did not show up. Inconvenience is petty and also useful. It shows you who believes they are entitled to your wallet. My mother called to ask why the subscribe and save had failed. I told her she could order anything she needed on my card, and I would bring it over, she said, not to make a fuss, and thanked me, and I hated how small her voice sounded in her own kitchen. I sat in my car after and stared at Grandpa Caleb's, letter 3 words written for me, so I would not hesitate. In the fall, I met with a bank officer I knew from college who now worked credit risk. I asked hypothetical questions about beneficiary changes and pay-on-death forms. He told me quietly that some people switch POD names during a busy week because banks are understaffed and no one notices until someone refuses to disappear. I nodded and went home and asked Aunt Linda to check the file she kept. She sent back a photo of a POD form changed in August from Patricia and Jenna to Erica. Only the same week, Erica smiled from that Nashville roof. The handwriting looked careful, like someone trying hard to imitate calm. I enlarged the photo and dropped it into my folder. I listed the codes beside it and the days the money moved. I wrote the words pattern of self-dealing in the margin and closed my eyes for a count of 5. Then I opened a new document and drafted a simple chronology, beginning with March 2023 and ending with August 2024. I wrote it in short lines that a clerk could scan, in under a minute. I included the 529 plan and the CD and the burial policy and the quiet letter. I included the roof that never happened and the fake urgency and the watch party without a stream. I included the laugh. I included the sentence, family has to be flexible. I included the Nashville check-in and the day the plan. Money left. People think revenge is a shout. Most of the time, it is a ledger that balances when you stop apologizing for keeping score. When I finished the draft, I printed 2 copies and placed them in a blue folder with plastic tabs, so no one could say it was a mess. My mother texted a photo of a casserole Erica had dropped off and wrote, "Sweet girl," and I stared at the screen until the words lost shape. I set 3 alarms on my phone to remind me to pull weekly statements until the pattern tripped itself. I made tea and sat at the table and listened to the hum of the refrigerator and the slight crack in the ceiling paint, where the roof was definitely not fixed. The next morning I woke early and ran a small trace on a test ACH that had pinged our account. It died quickly, which told me a new account had been spun up in a hurry. I wrote down the time and closed my laptop. I was not crying and I was not yelling, I was filing. And when Rick bragged at Sunday dinner about responsible stewardship, I smiled into my napkin and asked him how contractors handle deposits these days. He said cash is king and winked at Erica. I pressed my tongue to the back of my teeth and did not take the bait. Later, I drove home the long way past Edgewater Roofing and watched a crane swing over someone else's house. Then I parked by the lake and read Grandpa Caleb's line again, for Jenna's school or home. I chose both. I chose to learn everything and protect the place we stand, if Story Financial ever smelled wrong. Type receipts. September 2025 arrived with the brittle heat that makes the lake at Edgewater Park look like a glass table. The neighborhood potluck was already loud when I pulled into the gravel lot. Folding tables sat in a long, crooked line, pies sweating in their tins, crockpots steaming under cheap foil. I carried a bowl of pasta salad because that was what my mother asked for. She stood under the shade of a pop-up tent, wringing her hands while Rick held court at the grill. He lifted his chin when he saw me, and his voice rose just enough for nearby ears. Jenna made a contribution. He waved a sheet of paper like a game show host. He told me to read it out loud since transparency is good for family trust. People turned curious. I felt the tight burn behind my ribs. I asked him quietly what he was talking about, and he laughed a real belly laugh that pleased him so much. His face turned red. He was live streaming on his phone, comments popping up from his friends. He told everyone that I owed rent to my own mother, that I was freeloading and draining her savings. He shoved the phone at me and told me to smile. The words, shame of the family, left his mouth like they were rehearsed. My mother stood beside a tray of brownies, pretending she did not hear. I read nothing instead. I placed the bowl gently on the table. Rick kept talking, his voice rising over the music. Erica held her phone up for TikTok. She spoke to her followers as if I were a prop. She said kick her out and laughed like she had earned the line. I felt people watching, some pretending to care about the potato salad, some openly recording. The humiliation was sharp, not because of the words, but because my mother shrank into herself and did nothing. I folded my arms and looked at the lake. Rick hated being ignored. He walked over with a plate and lifted an oyster to my face. He knew I was allergic. He knew it from the time I had broken out in hives at a seafood buffet when I was 9. He told me to act grateful for what the family provided. His voice boomed. The oyster dripped brine onto my wrist. I stepped back and the plate clattered onto the grass. A few guests gasped. Rick leaned close and hissed about respect. My mother finally murmured, "Rick, please." But he shook her hand off like a fly. I swallowed the hot shame and reminded myself that humiliation is evidence when told correctly. I wiped my wrist with a napkin and walked to the picnic bench where he had set his cooler. I knew he had used my Amazon Prime account again for party supplies because packages had been arriving at my door that were addressed to him. He believed tech was magic and would always work for him. So on my phone, under the shade of a maple tree, I opened settings and removed him from my Prime household. I transferred my payment method to a separate card. I did not smile. I simply pressed, confirm. I imagined his next shipment failing. Confetti cannons and fancy garnish kits stuck in a warehouse bin. I heard him behind me, bragging about his new smoker, and his friends clapped him on the back. When the party wound down and people lined up for leftovers, he pulled out his phone to show someone a new purchase. His screen flashed a failed order message, and he jabbed it with his thumb. He cursed quietly but loud enough for his friend to hear. I watched his eyes swing to me, and I held his stare until he looked away. Small revenge is a rehearsal later that evening when the tables were folded and the sun slipped behind the trees. My mother rode home with him. I took my own car halfway back. I stopped for gas and checked the shared bank account notifications. A new Zelle transfer had just gone out. $7,500 from the joint account my mother shared with Rick. The memo read tuition refund. I froze for a second. Erica was not in school. She had dropped out of her online classes 2 months prior. I screenshotted the transaction. Then I opened an older folder and found messages where Erica bragged about a designer handbag she was saving for the pieces were stacking like bricks, building a wall around them. When I got to the house, the lights were on. Voices floated from the backyard where they sat by the fire pit. I stood in the kitchen doorway and listened. Rick talked about me like I was a burden. He'd been forced to carry family needs to see the truth. He said Erica poured wine and said she would never take advantage of people who help her. My mother said nothing. Her silence made my jaw tighten. I went to bed without saying goodnight, and in the dark, I pulled up the bank routing number used for the Zelle transfer. I could trace its receiving bank. I wrote the code down in my notebook along with the timestamp. I stared at the ceiling and counted the soft ticks of the HVAC humiliation had pulled the curtain back on their confidence. The next morning, I brewed coffee and packed my laptop bag. My mother came into the kitchen, her eyes puffy. She said people were just hungry for gossip. She asked me to let it go. I told her quietly that silence is consent and every story has a ledger. She winced and asked me not to make trouble. She said it always backfires on women. I laughed under my breath because she did not realize I had already placed the first domino that evening. Rick discovered his grill attachments had not arrived, and he called me asking if I had changed something. I told him he should speak to customer service. My voice steady. He slammed the phone down. I took a long shower and thought about the moment. By the lake, the oyster, the phone, the word shame, circling me like a fly. I considered how many women I knew who were told to laugh it off, to be the bigger person, to never embarrass a man in public, and how humiliation becomes a house you are forced to live in until you burn it down. I opened the Zelle screenshot again and zoomed in. The memo line had a flower emoji next to tuition refund, the kind of careless arrogance that comes from thinking no one will ever call them on it. The potluck had taught me what I needed to know. Rick loved an audience. He loved making someone small in front of witnesses that flaw would be his undoing. I saved the photo to a protected drive. Then I wrote a brief narrative in plain language like a legal clerk would on this date. At this event, Rick demanded a public reading to shame Jenna. While live streaming, while forcing food despite allergy witnesses present, I documented the TikTok that Erica posted the caption with "kick her out" and the laughter of strangers in the comments. I captured every detail because humiliation becomes justice when you know how to place it before someone with authority. That night, I made pasta and sat at my small dining table. I did not cry, I did not rage. I built a timeline. I placed the potluck incident in its row. Then I highlighted the Zelle transfer and drew a line up to the Nashville photo. The shape of their greed had symmetry. September days slipped by and parcels of backyard gossip turned into whispers on Facebook. The potluck video circulated among neighbors. A few messaged me quietly. One said, "I saw what he did. I am sorry." Another said, "If you ever need a witness, I will speak." I thanked them and saved the messages. When the first week of fall decided to cool down, I walked by the lake and watched the geese move from shore to water. The wind off the lake stung my cheeks. I remembered how small I felt with that oyster held to my mouth. Humiliation cuts deeper when it is done in the name of family. I closed my eyes and pictured Grandpa Caleb reading his own letter back to me. For Jenna school or home? It sounded like a promise, and I decided that night to make good on it. Humiliation was no longer a bruise. It was a receipt, and receipts get tallied. If you have seen conflict justice around a dinner table, comment noted. The morning after the potluck, I sat at my small kitchen table with my laptop open and a cup of coffee that had gone cold twice. Because every time I tried to drink it, my hands were busy saving files the humiliation had burned off and left something sharper. A kind of steady calculation. I logged into the joint banking portal that I still had access to, because no one ever expects the quiet one to understand systems. I downloaded every monthly statement for the last 12 months. Each PDF slid into a folder named Caleb Estate Review. The first pages looked ordinary. A few groceries, gas pharmacy, co-pays, but greed has a rhythm, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. In April, there was a charge from Best Buy for $6,800. The memo line said appliances, but my mother already had a full set. Barely 3 years old, I clicked the receipt and saw a gaming system, a curved monitor, and noise-canceling headphones. Then in May, a charge at Home Depot for $15,600. The invoice attached included lumber and composite deck boards. Rick had been bragging about expanding the deck for the 4th of July. He had posted a picture on Facebook with a caption about how real men build things. The comments were full of admiration. None of them knew the money came from a fund my grandfather intended for my home or my education in June. Another charge caught my breath. A golf club membership for $12,000. I remembered the potluck when Rick talked about his new friends at the course and how good it felt to be around successful people. My mother had smiled as if proud, and now I could see why in July a Vegas resort charge for $3,900 matching dates with a weekend when Erica posted poolside selfies with glittering sunglasses, the background had looked like Nevada glare, though she tagged Miami to look expensive. Then in August, a jewelry store receipt for $6,300. The purchase list included 2 watches, one engraved with initials that were not my mother's. I stared at the screen, and my chest hollowed out. The numbers told a story of theft dressed up as entitlement. When I opened the property records, I found a quitclaim deed recorded in May 2024, transferring 50% of the house from my mother to Rick, the signature on the line that said, Patricia Ramsey Harden, looked shaky. Not her usual clean script, and the witness signature was Erica's cousin, a name I recognized from her Instagram in July. The HELOC had been opened for $90,000. The bank statement showed transfers labeled repairs, even though no contractor had ever stepped foot on our roof. In August, the certificate of deposit worth $120,000 had its payable on death. Beneficiary changed from Patricia and Jenna to Erica Harden. My vision blurred for a moment. Not from tears, but from disbelief at how comfortably they rearranged my inheritance like furniture. I leaned back and let the numbers settle. Then I gathered each document in a structured timeline, date institution, amount beneficiary, and connected them to social media posts, check-ins, and purchases. It was like building a skeleton out of bones they thought were too small to notice by early afternoon. I had a binder of digital proof, and something like quiet rage sat in my throat. Not a scream, but a cold sentence forming. You will answer for this in risk operations. We learn that paper trails are never perfect. Someone always leaves a thread and you just need to pull. I drafted a litigation hold email addressed to the title company that serviced our house. I wrote in precise language that a dispute regarding ownership and possible unauthorized encumbrances was under review, and therefore all transfers or refinances must be paused pending legal verification. I copied Edgewater Roofing as well because I wanted everyone in their orbit to freeze. I sent the email with a clean signature block that included my role in risk analysis to anyone receiving it. My tone would sound like a lawyer's clerk, not an emotional daughter. I watched the sent confirmation and felt my heartbeat slow. Small revenge had become structured pressure, the kind people like Rick never account for that evening. Rick came home slamming doors. My mother stayed in the car a long time before coming inside. I sat on the couch and pretended to watch television. He walked past me muttering about contractors pausing work and banks asking questions. He accused a neighbor of meddling. His paranoia made him sloppy when Erica arrived. She paced around the kitchen, whispering fears that someone was reporting them. I changed channels without looking up. If they had paid attention to me for the last decade, they would know the quiet ones. Document everything. A week passed and the atmosphere in the house became tense. Rick kept checking his phone for updates on the deck project and finally learned that his contractor had received an inquiry from the roofing company asking about permits and invoices. He yelled in the backyard while the neighbor mowed his lawn. Erica sat on the patio swing, scrolling furiously. She did not realize I could see her screen reflecting in the sliding glass door. She was searching how to remove a payable on death beneficiary without notifying the original signer. She found nothing useful. 2 days later, an envelope arrived from the bank requesting clarification on the HELOC usage. Rick tore it open and threw it on the counter. He asked my mother to sign a letter he drafted. She hesitated and said her handwriting did not look right on forms lately. He snapped at her to stop being dramatic. She signed, but her hand shook. I watched from the hallway and felt a cold break inside my chest because this was not just theft. It was control. One night, Aunt Linda sent a message asking if I could come over. She said she needed to show me something, and her tone was different. Not her usual chatty self when I arrived. She had a folder open on the dining table. Inside was a photo of the POD form for the certificate of deposit. She pointed at the signature date, August 2024. Then she held up her phone showing Erica's Nashville check-in from the exact same day. Same hour, even Aunt Linda said quietly that the clerk had flagged irregularities because the same witness name had appeared on multiple estate changes within weeks. She had pulled the file when she felt something was off. We sat for a long minute with the weight of that realization between us. Erica had been in Nashville, miles away taking pool pictures while supposedly witnessing a signature in Cleveland. Fraud does not need a confession, just conflicting timestamps. I thanked Aunt Linda and scanned the document with my phone. She whispered that my grandfather would have hated seeing his money treated like play tokens on the drive home. The city lights blurred through the windshield. I thought about how they had tried to paint me as a burden while emptying accounts that were meant to lift me up. Humiliation from the potluck no longer felt like a wound. It felt like evidence. I pulled into the driveway and noticed Rick and Erica sitting on the porch, whispering harshly. They froze when I walked past. I did not greet them. I went straight to my room and backed up every file to a secure cloud folder. I printed a hard copy set and stored them in a fireproof lockbox under my bed. I wrote a brief note that said, "For court," and slid it inside. The numbers told the truth, even when people lied. If revenge, inheritance, drama. Family sounds familiar type. Court. Rick's anger hardened into strategy. Once he realized contractors were asking questions, he paced the kitchen with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in that performative voice he used when he wanted to sound like a victim. My mother sat at the breakfast table twisting a napkin. I was pouring coffee when he suddenly tapped the speaker button and pulled her closer. He said, "We should clear the air with family because Jenna owes $32,000 and refuses to pay." I heard a third voice join the line. It was Aunt Marjorie, who had always believed every word Rick said. He spoke slowly, as if explaining a complex crime. Jenna lived here rent-free, used our resources, cost us repairs, and we covered her debt. He asked my mother to confirm it, and she faltered, her voice low. She said it was more complicated. Rick cut her off and said, "Just say yes." Pressure wrapped around her words like a vice. I took a sip of coffee and said calmly that I owed nothing, that every expense had a receipt, that the estate funds were for me, not him. He slammed the phone on the counter so hard it rattled. Aunt Marjorie gasped and said families should not shame elders. He said exactly. Jenna should stop embarrassing her mother. My mother whispered my name like a plea. I felt the familiar tug of guilt, the way women are trained to fold themselves smaller, so no one complains about the noise. I put my mug in the sink and walked out to the porch because I needed air. The autumn leaves scraped along the concrete, and the wind carried the smell of the lake. I opened Facebook and saw Erica's newest post, a giant curved 85-inch television mounted on their bedroom wall. The caption said, "Earned, not given," and her smile dared someone to question it. Friends congratulated her. Some joked about sugar daddies. She commented back, laughing. I stared at the photo and felt something cold and quiet settle in my stomach. That television cost almost exactly what a semester of community college would have cost me at 22. I remembered working double shifts while they vacationed. I remembered patching cheap shoes because I did not want to ask my mother for help, and now they dress theft as achievement. That night, I sat on my bed with the binder of documents. I highlighted every charge tied to Erica's social media timeline. The pattern was undeniable. She lived like she won the lottery, except the winning ticket had my grandfather's name on it. On November 1st, 2025, I met attorney Naomi Price in a small office near downtown. The building was old brick with a stained glass window near the staircase. Inside smelled like paper and lemon cleaner. Naomi shook my hand firmly and asked me to tell her the story, without tears, without apology in chronological order. So I did. I told her about the potluck and the oyster, the live stream, the Zelle transfer, the deck receipts, the quitclaim deed, the HELOC, the payable on death change. She did not interrupt except to nod and jot down notes. When I finished, she opened a legal pad and said there were 4 documents we would prepare immediately. The first was a petition to compel accounting, because as a beneficiary, I had the right to demand a full, transparent ledger of where the estate funds had gone. The second was an emergency injunction to freeze the accounts and the property title until a judge could review suspicious activity. The third was an elder exploitation report to the Ohio Attorney General, because coercing my mother into signing away assets while isolating her financially could qualify as abuse. The fourth was a motion to undo the quitclaim deed on grounds of undue influence. My hands shook a little as I signed the engagement letter, not from fear but from relief, that someone in authority finally said out loud that what I saw was real. When I left her office, the sky was already dark. Downtown Cleveland hummed with traffic and neon. I walked slowly to my car, feeling like the ground under my feet was less tilted. That night, I cooked dinner quietly. My mother sat across from me, but barely touched her plate. She said Rick was under stress and did not mean to shout. I said stress does not sign legal documents or drain trust accounts. She put her fork down and said she wished we could all be loving like before. I swallowed the bitter laugh that rose to my throat, because love without honesty is just decoration. The next day, Rick and 2 of his loudest friends met at a sports bar I know because he bragged about it. They ordered wings and beer and talked about the golf course when the bill came. He offered to pay because he enjoyed showing off. I watched from the hallway camera feed he had forgotten to remove me from. He handed his card to the server and smiled. Then the server returned and said quietly that the payment was declined. His friends stared. He fumbled for another card, and that one failed too. Because earlier that morning I had removed his authorized user status from my credit accounts. The server offered a polite apology, and Rick went red as a fire engine. His friends laughed at first, but went silent when he snapped at them. One of them slid his own card across the table and paid, while Rick muttered that the bank was glitching. Humiliation is sharp when it happens in front of men he wants approval from. When he came home, he stomped around demanding to know if someone messed with the accounts. I said I only manage my own cards if he lost access, then the bank probably made a change. His shoulders stiffened. He hated feeling powerless that night. My mother curled on the couch watching an old movie. She looked tired and smaller. Somehow, Rick and Erica fought in hushed tones in the driveway. I opened my laptop and checked my email. A message from the probate clerk waited in my inbox. The subject said filing status. I clicked it and read that the petition to compel accounting, the emergency injunction, and the elder exploitation referral were accepted for review. The clerk wrote that a preliminary decision would likely be issued on November 13th, only 12 days away. I sat very still. The house around me seemed to breathe with its own pulse beyond the window. The streetlights glowed amber and cold. My mother dozed off, clutching a throw pillow in the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. I thought about all the nights I had stayed quiet to keep the peace, all the times I let myself shrink. I was done shrinking. The next morning, I printed the email and slid it beneath a stack of insurance papers where Rick would eventually find it. I wanted him to feel the first tremor before the ground opened under him. The gaslighting had reached its last chapter. I no longer argued. I no longer reacted. I let paperwork speak. The day passed without event, but I could feel his eyes on me, like a dog waiting for a signal. The money had taught him to believe he controlled everything. He forgot that greed leaves fingerprints, truths hide in receipts, and courts do not care about his charm, ready for revenge through truth. Say freeze. By the second week of November, the air in Cleveland turned sharp and windy. Flags whipped against porches, and the lake carried a cold silver sheen inside our house. Rick moved with a jittery energy, opening drawers and slamming them. Checking his email every few minutes, he told my mother that the 60-year birthday celebration at Knights of Columbus Hall needed to be perfect. Because important people were coming, he showed her a catering invoice for $6,800 that he had already scheduled on her card. She asked why it was charged to her instead of the joint account, and he said the bank was being slow with the new line. He called it a privilege to pay for family gatherings, but I knew what it really was. Another attempt to drain money before the court could see. When my mother walked out of the kitchen, I pulled up the transaction on my phone and filed a pre-dispute chargeback because unauthorized use of a senior's card is not a family moment. It is evidence I saved the confirmation and stared at the number like it was a countdown clock. I spent the afternoon assembling a list of witnesses. Aunt Linda as co-executor of the estate, the roofing contractor who could testify that no repairs were ever ordered, and a credit officer friend from my department who understood how HELOCs should be monitored. I sent them all clear explanations with dates and screenshots. Each one replied that they would stand by me. A small part of my chest cracked open with something like gratitude, not because I needed rescue, but because silence had company now for the birthday event. Rick hired a photographer because he wanted pictures of himself shaking hands with the men from the golf club. I booked a second photographer on my own, quietly paying cash. Not for glamour, but for documentation. Someone to capture documents, expressions, reactions, something that could carry weight in a courtroom if needed. The quiet strategy soothed the humiliation of the potluck days, blended into preparation. I kept a calm face while Rick stormed through the house, barking instructions and muttering about banks being incompetent. Erica hung banners with gold glitter that shed onto the carpet. She boasted about custom centerpieces arriving. I knew they would not because 3 days earlier I had removed Rick from every Amazon subscribe and save setting he used under my account, which meant his automatic deliveries of paper towels, cleaning supplies, and party decor would vanish into thin air. It was petty, yes, but sometimes petty is a scalpel. The morning of November 13th arrived with a gray sky and frost on the lawns. I sat at my kitchen table, refreshing my email every few minutes. The probate clerk had said the preliminary decision could land any time that week at 3:40 in the afternoon. My phone buzzed with a notification. The subject line read, "Interim injunction granted." I opened it slowly, savoring each word. The judge issued a temporary freeze on all trust-related accounts and property transactions associated with the estate. A certified copy had been sent to the title company with instructions to attach a lien notice to the house. My heart thumped in my ears. My hands went warm and shaky. I read the email 3 times and printed it, sliding the warm paper into a folder marked Exhibits. This was not the final verdict, but it was a door slamming shut right in Rick's face, the kind of door you cannot pry open with charm or threats. I picked up my phone and called the photographer I hired, confirming that he understood his role. He said he did. He had done corporate compliance photos before and knew how to capture evidence without making a scene. I thanked him and packed my bag. That night, my mother stirred a pot of sauce in the kitchen, her face pale and tired. Rick sat on the couch, flipping channels, complaining that shipping delays were destroying his party. He cursed at the news anchor like it was her fault on the morning of the event. I woke before the sun packed my binder of documents, 2 cameras, and a slim thumb drive filled with PDF files. I dressed in a simple black dress and tied my hair back. No sequins, no shimmer. This was not a celebration for me. This was a stage. The Knights of Columbus Hall smelled like floor polish and coffee, round tables covered in white cloths, gold balloons swayed on strings. A DJ tested speakers near the bar. The caterer paced near the kitchen, waiting for payment clearance. I watched Rick hand over my mother's card. The manager swiped it and frowned. He tried again, and the frown deepened. Finally, he said the payment was under dispute and could not be processed. Rick's voice rose sharp and angry. He accused the manager of incompetence. The manager pointed at the screen and shrugged. Helplessly, guests began arriving just in time to see the argument. Rick's neck flushed red. I remained near the entrance greeting. No one simply observing the photographer I hired blended into the group as if shooting candid party photos. But I saw his lens angle toward the credit terminal, toward Rick's clenched jaw, toward the moment frustration curdled into panic when enough guests had gathered. Rick grabbed the microphone and forced a loud smile, pretending nothing was wrong. He thanked everyone for coming and boasted about his accomplishments, how he built a comfortable life for his family, how he believed in loyalty and tradition. I stepped forward, my shoes quiet on the polished floor. Guests turned, some whispering, some remembering the potluck video that had circulated. Rick's smile faltered. I carried the binder in one hand. The photographer lifted his camera. The other photographer Rick hired swung his lens toward me out of instinct. The room hushed as I walked to the center. I asked the DJ to pause the music, and he did. Rick ordered me to sit down, his voice harsh. I opened the binder and held it up, speaking calmly. I said, "This is the accounting you refused to provide." The room stiffened. Guests leaned in. I read aloud from the statements. Best Buy, $6,800. Home Depot, $15,600. Golf membership, $12,000. Vegas Resort, $3,900. Watches, $6,300. A few guests frowned because they had seen the deck and the new jewelry. I explained the HELOC for $90,000, how it was recorded as roof repairs that never happened. I held up the certificate of deposit change, payable on death, altered from Patricia and Jenna to Erica. A guest whispered, "Oh my God." Rick sputtered that I was lying. The photographer captured his expression. I raised my phone and said the court issued an interim injunction. All accounts and property are frozen, and the title company has attached a lien notice right on cue. Rick's phone rang. He answered in front of the microphone, and everyone heard the muffled voice informing him of the lien gasps rippled through the hall. Erica's eyes went wide. Her phone slipped from her hand. The caterer wheeled the trays back toward the kitchen because no payment meant no food. Guests shifted in discomfort. Some stepped away from Rick as if corruption might spill off him. Aunt Linda walked to my side and placed her hand on my shoulder. She told the room that the estate would be audited in court, that every dollar would be accounted for. The roofing contractor approached and quietly confirmed there were never any repair orders. The credit officer confirmed how the HELOC had been misused. The cameras captured each word. Humiliation did not belong to me anymore. It sat heavy on Rick's shoulders. He tried to grab the binder from my hands, but I stepped back and the photographer snapped the moment the image of a man reaching, while the truth stayed just out of his grasp. My mother stood in the doorway, tears on her cheeks. She finally whispered, "Enough." Rick froze. Guests began leaving in silence. Some patting my arm as they passed. The hall felt colder, emptier, like a stage after a play where the villain forgot his lines. I gathered my documents and walked outside into the night air. The wind off the lake smelled like winter coming quiet. Justice does not need shouting, it needs witnesses. If you want quiet justice, live, say, Hall. The night of November 14th is cold and damp, and I carry my mother's prescriptions in a brown paper sack. I park under the weak streetlight across from the little Cape Cod on West 112th and sit long enough to hear the engine tick and my breath fog. Then I cross the yard where frost has silvered the grass and knock and call through the door that I have her medication and hot soup. The porch light snaps on and the living room curtain edge lifts and a pale hand retreats. A shadow moves behind the glass, and I hear the deadbolt drop hard. Rick's voice comes flat and loud through the wood, and he says that I am not a daughter in this house, and that I should take my pity somewhere else. There is a pause, and I picture my mother behind the curtain with her fingers to her lips. I set the bag gently on the mat and tell her through the panel that the dosage schedule is written in plain pen on top. I stand there and let the silence lay like a sheet of ice between us. I taste the metal edge of humiliation, and it is the same taste from the cookout and the phone calls and the bank counters, only colder. I step away and the porch light goes off as if a stagehand yanked the chain. The street feels too bright and too empty at once. I walk back to the car, and I do not cry because I have run out of tears for this kind of performance. I drive to Edgewater Park and pull into the far lot by the low fence, where the lake wind comes in heavy. I kill the headlights and sit in the dark with the dome light off. I take out my grandfather's letter from the small envelope I have kept in the glove box since March, and I read the lines I know by heart for Jenna school or home. Do what lets you build and belong. The paper is soft at the folds and smells faintly of the cedar box, where it lived for years. I breathe in and tell myself no more pleading for courtesy at a table that serves me contempt, no more explaining my work or my choices to people who spend what they did not earn and call it leadership. The lake is black and the waves slap the rocks with a slow, tired sound, and I let the rhythm carry my heart back down from its sprint. I open my phone and scroll the notes where I keep every time date amount, ledger entry, every account number, masked, every call, reference code. I look at the calendar where I mark the hearing date and the injunction timestamp. I send myself a quiet message with a single word resolve. Then I open the insurance portal and file a report on the policy for the house that Rick has been describing as a construction zone. I list the claimed home repairs and attach the photos of the intact roofline from August and the contractor email that says, "No service orders on record." I submit the discrepancy and request a review. I know the carrier will re-rate and backbill and flag the account for misrepresentation. I imagine Rick at the pro shop trying to renew his tea time and watching his monthly auto pay jump. Because the premium has been corrected to reality, it is a small thing, and also not small at all, because it marks the shift from absorbing to returning. I drive a slow loop through the park and think about how anger wants the loudest option and dignity wants the effective option. I choose effective. I park again and wrap my coat tighter and lean back and look through the windshield at the smear of city lights on the water and feel the ache of the child part of me that still thinks a mother will open the door if you knock softly enough. A gull screams and the sound slices the thought in, too, and leaves me with the quiet that comes after I scroll to the old family thread and see the frozen last message from my aunt asking me to be kind. I think about how kindness without boundaries is just an invitation to theft. I close the thread and open the banking app and check the alerts from earlier and see the hold sitting in gray and the notes from the title office that the lien notice posted. The system is slow, but it is moving and I can feel it. I put the phone down and rest my palms on the steering wheel and feel the tacky spots where the vinyl is worn smooth from years of commuting, and I am struck by how ordinary survival looks from the inside. Not a speech, not a triumph, just a woman in a parking lot refusing to hand away the last of her piece. I drive past the old pier and circle back toward the house. The porch light is off again and the brown bag still sits on the mat where I left it. I take a photo with a timestamp and send it to myself to record that I delivered medication on schedule. I do not knock again. I walk to the curb and wait for the ache to crest and fall. And when it does, I get in the car and go home to my quiet apartment, where the radiator knocks like polite knuckles. I shower and put on the sweater that smells like clean soap, and I set a kettle and sit at the small table with the letter and the file and the copy of the interim order, and I list what must happen tomorrow morning in plain language. File clerk, copy, to bank email to title office. Follow-up call to carrier's special investigations unit. Confirm caterer dispute. Reference prepare print. Set for the hall. I lay out my navy dress and the low heels that will not slip on a gym floor. And I place the photographs of the roof and the screenshots of the transfers in a fresh manila folder. I am not preparing for a fight. I am preparing for clarity. The kettle clicks off and I pour and hold the mug until the heat climbs through my fingers and into my chest just after 9. The phone buzzes and the name I expect flashes at the top. Erica. I let it buzz twice more because I am not a fire she can stamp out. Then I open the message and read the words that lay out the shape of their panic. We emptied the rest, do your worst. I look at the timestamp and then I open the bank app and see the new outgoing wire line sitting there. Crisp and smug $45,000 to Erica Harden at 9:03 p.m. on November 15th. My own laugh is small and without joy because what could be more perfect than their belief that speed equals safety? I screenshot the entry and save it to the folder called Hall Exhibits, and I tag it with the same naming convention as the rest because the order matters. I text Aunt Linda with a short update, and she responds with a single period, which is our code for proceed. I set the phone face down and let the quiet fill the room again. There is fear in me, and there is resolve in me, and one is louder, but the other is heavier. I imagine the hall lights the banner, the applause that will curdle when the caterer pauses service. I imagine Rick pointing at me with that false grin, and I imagine the process server stepping into the doorway at just the right beat. I fold the letter and slide it back into the envelope and touch the edge of the paper as if it were a small door. I can close gently behind me. I tell myself again no more, and the words fit this time. They settle in, like a key that finally turns. I wash the mug and set it on the rack and pull the blinds and sit on the edge of the bed and feel the tired wash through me, and I let it. I do not bargain with the past, and I do not perform for ghosts. I set 2 alarms and put the phone on the dresser. The radiator ticks, and the city hums, and the lake wind pushes against the window. But inside, it is still. I am not waiting to be chosen by the people who called me a burden. I am choosing the next right action, and then the one after that, and then the one after. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn folds into the night, and I think of tracks and routes and destinations, and how none of them require permission. Morning will bring forms and stamps and a hall full of faces, and I will bring paper and truth and a steady voice. The night is my last test, and it passes because I do not reach for the phone to plead or accuse. I reach for sleep like a clean sheet. And when it comes, I do not dream of doors closing. I dream of doors I build. I keep walking toward the lake, steady, certain, finally breathing. If choosing dignity over money ever saved you, type enough. Morning shows up pale and metallic on November 15th. The kind of light that makes everything look like it has been dipped in cold water. I wake before my alarm and sit on the edge of the bed, with my feet on the floor and my eyes focused on the folder of documents resting on the chair. I shower, quickly, dress in navy tie, my hair back, my hands are steady, my breath controlled. I drive downtown while the city yawns awake, traffic lights blink, yellow delivery trucks rumble by, and the lake air tastes like iron. I pull into the Cuyahoga County probate parking lot at 8:14 a.m. The sky is a dull gray sheet. The courthouse steps feel heavy under my shoes, but my body keeps moving inside the lobby. The security guard asks for my bag, and I hand it to him. He glances at the binder filled with paper and nods. I walk to the clerk's window and say my name, with a voice that does not shake the clerk. A woman in her 50s with careful handwriting and a calm presence looks at the forms Naomi helped me prepare. She reads each title: Petition to Compel, Accounting, Emergency Injunction Report of Elder Exploitation, Motion to Void, Quitclaim, and she nods again. She stamps them with a heavy thunk that echoes in my chest. She says, "Sit for a moment." I do. The courthouse smells faintly of dust and old wood. A man coughs into his elbow. The clock on the wall ticks in uneven beats. After a few minutes, she returns and says the filings are accepted and the scan will be sent to the bank and the title office immediately as part of the interim injunction. She even turns the monitor to show me the outgoing queue, the names of the institutions lined up in neat typing. I thank her because sometimes dignity sounds like good manners, even in the middle of war. I step into the hallway and pull out my phone, and the screen lights up with notifications as the automatic system delivers the injunction to the bank compliance department and the title company portal. I know exactly what happens next. The bank will place a temporary hold on the accounts tied to the estate, pending a judicial review. The title company will attach a lien notice to the house so that no refinancing or sale or second mortgage can move forward. The digital chain settles into place, a net slowly tightening. I walk outside into the cold and let the air sting my cheeks because the sting proves I am awake, and this moment is real in the car. I call the insurance carrier's Special Investigations Unit and calmly report that the home repair claims tied to the HELOC appear inconsistent with available contractor documentation and recent inspections. The representative asks for evidence, and I email the photos of the roof and the invoice history that shows nothing but air. She says they will re-rate the policy and request supporting documents from the account holder. I thank her and hang up the picture of Rick pacing around the kitchen, shouting into his phone at an insurance agent who does not care about his tantrum, brings a quiet satisfaction that is not joy, but closure. I drive home and sit in my living room with the binder open, like a map of choices. The clock ticks toward the evening. I know the Knights of Columbus Hall is already being decorated. The DJ testing equipment, the caterer waiting for payment, the guests pressing suits and dresses during the afternoon. My mother sends a short message asking me to come early and be polite. I do not reply. There is no argument left in me, just action at 4:30. My phone buzzes again. An unknown number flashes on the screen. I answer, and a stressed voice identifies itself as the venue manager. He says the payment for the balance due on the event cannot be processed because a chargeback has been filed and the card is under dispute. He asks if the host would like to bring cash or a certified check because without payment, the catering cannot proceed. I say you should contact Rick directly, and I hang up. I imagine his face when that call arrives. The party built on stolen money now has to survive on whatever is in his wallet by 5 p.m. I receive a second email from the bank. The interim hold has gone into effect. The accounts tied to the trust are frozen and will require judicial instruction for release. I forward the message to Naomi with the subject line progress. She replies with a single sentence, "Good work at 5:30. I put on my coat and gather my things. The key to this whole night is not noise, it is timing." I arrive at the hall before sunset and park, where I can see the entrance guests in shiny shoes and evening dresses stream into the lobby carrying gift bags and little envelopes. Laughter spills out the doors. I stay in the car a moment, hands on the wheel, breathing in and out until the last bit of nervous heat leaves my body. Then I step out into the cold and walk toward the building inside. The air is warm and bright. Chandeliers gleam. Banners hang across the stage. Rick stands near the microphone, shaking hands with men in golf jackets. He sees me and his face tightens. He steps forward and says, "You are not welcome." But his voice wobbles and his eyes flicker toward the manager who stands nearby holding a clipboard. My mother approaches with a stiff smile. She touches my arm and whispers, "Please behave." I look at her and say quietly, "Truth does not misbehave." The manager interrupts and asks Rick about the payment because the caterer is refusing to plate the entree without cleared funds. Rick blusters and offers a card. The manager tries it and the machine emits a dull beep. The screen shows restricted. Rick tries another card, then another. I watch the color drain from his face as each attempt stalls. His voice rises first, with authority, then with panic. Guests shift uncomfortably. Someone whispers that maybe the bank shut his card down. A woman in a sequined dress chuckles. I step closer and say, "Perhaps the bank placed a hold as a matter of compliance." Rick glares at me and says, "You did this." And I answer, "No, the truth did this." The manager apologizes and says, unless a certified check is produced, the caterer cannot serve dinner. The DJ lowers the volume, and the glittering room becomes an uneasy silence. Rick storms toward the door. Erica follows her heels, clicking like tiny hammer blows. I remain where I am. Steady, the photographer I hired earlier, drifts into place, capturing the tension rippling across the crowd. I pull out my phone, open the email from the bank, and read aloud the sentence. Confirming the freeze, my voice is even controlled. Every word drops like a pebble in a still pond. Guests stare at me and then at Rick. The manager clears his throat and says he hopes everything can be resolved. Rick throws his hands up and curses under his breath. Someone captures it on their phone. Humiliation is circular. The one who wielded it now wears it. I stay calm because calm is the sharpest blade. I walk to a small table near the entrance and set down my binder. The photographer catches the moment when Rick tries once again to pay, and the card fails. The caterer wheels the trays back toward the kitchen, and the guests slowly realize that this glittering celebration has no food, no payment, no dignity. My mother stands with her shoulders slumped, her lips trembling. I look at her with something like grief and something like release. The night is exactly what it was always going to be. The truth does not need permission to stand in the room. It stands on its own, ready for truth and closure type. Burn. It is 7:30 in the evening when the hall reaches its peak. Every chair filled every table, lit by small candles flickering against gold balloons that spell Rick at 60. The DJ plays a soft jazz track and people laugh loudly as if volume can prove happiness. Near the entrance, a giant seating chart stands on an easel with names in neat script and a bold red line slicing through my name. Someone thought that was clever. Guests sip wine and pick at small appetizers while they wait for the main course. The caterer wheels silver trays toward the kitchen. I stand just outside the double doors for one breath. Then I step forward, my heels tapping steady on the polished floor. No rush, no drama, just presence. The room shifts as people notice whispers ripple. A few phones lift, Rick freezes mid-handshake, and his smile drops like a cheap mask. He stares at me with the same disbelief he had at the bank. I walk to the center of the room calmly, the kind of calm that comes after too many storms. I look at the seating chart as I pass and trace the red line with my eyes. Someone gasps softly. I keep moving until I reach the small riser where the microphone stands. Next to it sits a screen, projecting a looping slideshow of Rick posing with friends on golf courses and poolsides, his pride curated like a museum. I tap the screen control and the image glitches, then a bright notice replaces it. Payment dispute chargeback, pending the words, in bold letters shine across the ballroom. The caterer stops mid-step. The servers look toward the kitchen manager, who slowly shakes his head. The main course will not be served. The room grows quiet, uncomfortable, embarrassed for him. Rick storms toward the stage, demanding the slideshow be restored. But I lift the microphone with steady fingers and say, "There has been a financial misunderstanding. Several receipts need clarification." The DJ lowers the volume to silence, and every eye turns toward me. The photographer I hired stands a few feet away, lens raised, capturing the scene, exactly as it unfolds. I take a breath and speak clearly. Tonight is about truth, not performance. So let us begin with the first exhibit. I hold up a printed statement showing a withdrawal of $82,600 from the 529 plan that my grandfather set aside before he died. Rick told everyone it was for a roof emergency. I gesture toward the roofer standing near the back, a quiet man in work boots. I ask him politely if any repairs were ever ordered. He shakes his head and says, "Not a single one. He never stepped on our lawn." The guests murmur, Exhibit 2, a wire of $45,000 at 9:03 p.m. on November 15th, sent to Erica Harden. No explanation, just money moved like water down a drain. Erica tries to laugh it off and calls it a family matter, but the bank will not see it that way. Exhibit 3, a $90,000 home equity line of credit drawn in July, categorized as property improvement. I show the date and time, then the photo of our untouched roof and our original siding. Exhibit 4, a certificate of deposit worth $120,000, the payable on death beneficiary, altered in August 2024 from Patricia and Jenna to Erica. I hold up a screenshot of the Nashville check in Erica, posted the same day, the same hour. The camera zooms in on her stunned face. The crowd rustles with uneasy recognition. Exhibit 5, luxury expenses, a new television bigger than the living room wall, a golf club membership, A Vegas resort weekend designer watches with engraving every purchase funded by accounts meant to protect my mother and support my future. The hall is so silent I can hear the ice melting in the glasses. Rick tries to interrupt, but the microphone amplifies my voice over his. I say calmly that the Clifton County Probate Court issued an interim injunction this afternoon, freezing all estate assets until a full judicial review. I raise my phone and hold the email up to the projector. The words appear on the screen: accounts frozen, pending audit. Someone near the back covers her mouth. Rick's face turns the color of spoiled milk. He sputters and reaches for the binder in my hand, but I step back and keep my voice even. No yelling, no crying, just documentation, while everyone watches the caterer wheels the trays back toward the door. Guests stare at their empty plates, some whisper to each other, some stare at Rick with betrayal in their eyes. A man in a suit near the bar shakes his head. Then something shifts in the air. The double doors open and a stranger walks in. Holding a folder and wearing the formal black coat of a process server, his voice carries through the microphone as he announces, "Mr. Hardin, you have been served." Rick goes still like a stunned animal. The man hands him the envelope, service complete. I do not smile. I simply watch my mother's hand trembles at her side. Aunt Linda walks forward from her seat and stands next to me, her voice steady and clear as she says, "We audit in court with the judge." The photographer captures her words, and the crowd inhales sharply. Someone's phone buzzes loud in the hush. Rick looks at the screen and his shoulders sag. He mumbles into the phone, but the manager at the title company speaks too loudly for privacy. Lien notice active, no refinancing, no sale possible. People begin gathering their coats. One old friend pats my shoulder and whispers, "Good for you." Someone else shakes his head at Rick and walks out. Erica backs away as if the floor is tilting, her glittering shoes slipping on the polished surface. My mother covers her mouth with both hands, tears shining at the corners of her eyes. She whispers my name like a prayer or a question. Rick tries to recover, tries to offer jokes, tries to say this is all a misunderstanding, but the room has turned away from him. Humiliation lives in the empty silence that fills a party after the music has died. I place the microphone back on the stand and gather my binder. I do not need applause. Quiet justice does its own work. I walk toward the exit, passing the seating chart where my name is still crossed out in red. I touch the paper lightly and let my hand fall away outside. The air is cold and sharp. The wind lifts my hair and carries the distant sound of traffic. The photographer sends me a short message with the first photos attached, each one crisp, time-stamped, undeniable. I inhale and feel my ribs loosen as if a band has snapped inside the hall. Rick's voice rises in anger and then breaks the doors close behind me, and I do not look back. Silent. Revenge is not about noise. It is about certainty. If silent revenge done right gives peace, comment, justice. When the doors shut behind me, the air tasted like metal in winter. I walked to my car without turning back, because the night did not need my eyes on it to know what had happened. The truth was already moving, already rippling, already spreading the way a dropped stone turns a calm lake into circles that will not stop until they reach the far bank. By the time I reached the corner of the parking lot, a group of guests slipped out the side door. Talking in low, shocked voices, one woman clutched her purse to her chest and said she could not believe the gall. Another man shook his head and muttered that he had loaned Rick money for a business idea. Last spring, their words carried in the wind, and I kept walking. The photographer texted me 3 photos, the slideshow of the payment dispute, the process server handing Rick the envelope, and the moment he lunged toward my binder, while the room stared at him like they had just seen a mask fall off. I saved them with the others, cars pulled out quickly, taillights flickering against the black lot like fireflies escaping a jar. Humiliation had turned into silence, and silence had turned into exit. That was the pattern of the night. At home, I made tea and sat by the window, listening to the radiator click. My phone buzzed again. This time, a neighbor sent a link to a video already uploaded to Facebook by someone from the VFW post. The caption read, "You won't believe what just happened at Rick's birthday." The video showed the projector screen flashing payment dispute, then cut to me, listing the exhibits, voices in the background, gasping and whispering, someone saying, "My God, she brought paperwork." The clip ended with the process server stepping forward within 15 minutes. The video had 100 shares by midnight. It had spread through the neighborhood, small digital threads tying truth to witness. In the morning, the wind rattled the windows, and I woke to 3 unread messages from coworkers who had seen the video online. They asked if I was okay. One said quietly that her sister had gone through something similar, and she was proud of me for standing up. I replied with a "thank you" and nothing more. Sometimes dignity is just 2 words and silence. Rick called my mother's phone 10 times, then mine twice. I let both go unanswered at 9 a.m. I checked the bank portal and saw the hold still in effect. Rick's debit card was restricted. The credit line suspended a formal notation reading, "Pending judicial review," sat like a lock on every page. The insurance carrier sent an email requesting proof of the alleged home repairs failure to respond. Within 10 business days would result in surcharge and adjustment. I pictured Rick pacing through the house shouting at an agent who could not be intimidated by noon. A friend from the golf club sent a screenshot of an internal note. Rick's membership privileges were temporarily suspended, pending investigation into financial irregularities. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I simply saved the screenshot and added it to the file. My mother arrived at my apartment in the late afternoon, her coat buttoned crooked and her eyes swollen. She sat at my kitchen table and wiped her nose on a tissue. She said that neighbors were talking and family was messaging and everything was spinning out of control. She whispered, "Please do not go to court. Please let it go. We can handle things privately." I stirred sugar into my tea and said quietly, "The only thing that happens in private is more theft. The only way to end it is to tell the truth in court." Her lip trembled and she said Rick was sorry and he would pay back some of the money if I stopped this. Her voice broke on the word, "some." I leaned back and looked at her hands, small and shaking, and I said gently, "Tell the truth in court." She closed her eyes because she knew I meant it when she left. I felt grief tighten inside my ribs. Not grief for Rick, not grief for money, but grief for the idea of family that had died long before tonight. The clock ticked. The room settled. The anger gone. Only clarity left later that evening. I opened my laptop and filled out IRS Form 3949A, reporting that expenses listed as home repair were in fact personal luxury charges. I attached the receipts from Best Buy Home Depot, the golf club the resort weekend. I included the roofer's email stating no service orders had ever been placed. I sent the packet by secure submission and saved the confirmation with the rest. A tiny act, a quiet thread tied to a larger tapestry at 10 p.m. My Aunt Linda called to say that the probate judge had issued an additional entry, an order to show cause, which meant Rick was now required to explain under penalty why his management of the estate funds should not count as self-dealing, which carried consequences, including surcharge and attorney's fees. She said it calmly, but I could hear something fierce underneath, something like long patience, finally sharpening. I thanked her. She said your grandfather would be proud. I sat alone in the dim kitchen and thought about how justice rarely looks dramatic from the inside. It looks like paperwork, signatures, timestamps, a crowd turning away from a man who thought he was untouchable. I washed my cup and set it on the counter to dry outside the street lamp, glowed over wet pavement. Cars hissed past the neighborhood, settling into sleep somewhere across town. Rick sat in a house he no longer controlled, with accounts he could no longer use insurance, he could not explain, and a public that had seen behind the curtain. My mother's car would be parked in the drive. Her face drawn tight with confusion and loyalty that had nowhere left to go. But the truth stood where it always does, steady, unembarrassed, unconcerned with popularity. I turned off the lights and walked to my room, the sheets cool against my skin, my body heavy with exhaustion, but my mind quiet tomorrow. There would be phone calls, paperwork, maybe more threats, but direction had replaced fear. I was not the disgrace they named me to be. I was the witness they never expected. If reclaiming respect matters more than approval, type enough. On the morning of December 2nd, the sky over downtown Cleveland is the color of pewter, and the courthouse steps shine with a thin glaze of frost. I park in the narrow lot beside the brick building and turn off the engine. The heater hums for a moment before fading. I sit with both hands on the steering wheel and breathe slowly, because today is not about anger. It is about conclusion. I gather my binder, the envelope with copies, the original letter from my grandfather that I have carried through every storm when I open the car door. The wind cuts across the lot and my coat whips against my legs. I walk toward the entrance and hear hurried footsteps behind me. Rick steps into my path, his face pale and tight, his voice low and frantic. He says, "You can stop this. Unfreeze the accounts. We are family, we can fix this without a judge." The way he says, family sounds like a rope he is trying to tie around my ankles. I do not step back. I do not raise my voice. I simply take the letter from my folder and hold it up. The handwriting. Crooked with age. The words for Jenna School, or home. Do what lets you build and belong. I tell him quietly that the letter is older than his excuses, older than his charm, older than the lies he fed my mother, and that family does not drain a dead man's last gift. He reaches for my arm, then thinks better of it. He looks around the lot as if someone might run over and rescue his pride, but no one comes. He drops his hand and mutters that judges always believe the loudest person I say maybe, but today the loudest person will be paperwork. I walk past him. The automatic doors slide open, and the warm, dry air of the courthouse washes over me in the hallway. Naomi waits with a stack of files. She greets me with a small nod and says, "You are ready." We enter the courtroom, wood benches, lined in rows. The judge, a stern woman with glasses low on her nose. My mother sits in the gallery clutching a tissue, her face drawn with worry and something else. Something like regret. Rick and Erica sit at the front table with their attorney, who speaks to them in hushed, impatient tones. The judge calls the case. The clerk reads the petition, titles Naomi stands, and presents the timeline. Every receipt, every transfer, every misrepresentation. She is calm, concise, and relentless. The judge questions. The quitclaim deed. First, why the signature did not match prior documents, why the witness listed was out of state on the date recorded. The notary stamp mismatched. The judge finally says the quitclaim is void for undue influence. Rick's attorney blusters, but the judge's gavel taps once, and the sound is final. Next, the judge addresses the payable on death change. She compares the timestamps of Erica's Nashville check-in and the bank form, then restores the pod to Patricia and Jenna. My mother lets out a slow breath she's been holding for months. The judge turns to the financial statements, the 529 plan drained under the fiction of roof repairs, the HELOC pulled without corresponding invoices, the wire of $45,000 sent to Erica without documentation, the luxury purchases labeled as property improvements the judge orders restitution and surcharge. Rick must repay the misappropriated funds, plus attorney's fees. His shoulders sag, as if weights have been hung from his bones. The judge continues issuing a protective order that places my mother's financial decisions under temporary supervision to prevent further exploitation. My mother bows her head, embarrassed yet relieved. Erica's jaw clenches as the judge notes that beneficiaries who receive funds from estate accounts may be required to return them under audit. The room holds its breath. The judge asks if I have anything to add. I rise and hold the letter again. I say my grandfather trusted us to honor his wishes, to take care of my mother, and to build a life I could be proud of. Theft disguised as generosity is still theft. Silence disguised as loyalty is still betrayal. I sit, and the judge nods. Once final, the gavel strikes, and the hearing closes outside the courtroom. Rick tries to speak, tries to say he can repay in installments, tries to ask for mercy, but the words fall flat. Naomi walks with me to the steps and says the rest is just paperwork and time. In January 2026, I sign a lease on a small duplex near Edgewater. The building is old but clean, with a view of the lake through bare winter trees. The walls smell of fresh paint and possibility. I carry my books and dishes up the narrow stairs and stack them in neat piles. I buy a thrifted sofa and a tiny kitchen table. I set a small framed photo of my grandfather on the sill with his favorite fountain pen beside it. I start a little routine on payday $50 a month, set aside into an envelope labeled music. For the neighbor's child who plays a borrowed violin in the courtyard and dreams of lessons, the small kindness feels like a bridge back to the person I was before shame tried to take my voice. One evening in mid-January, the phone buzzes. Erica's number glows on the screen. I let it ring twice. Then answer her voice is thin. She says her company's human resources department is investigating the wire transfer after a report from the bank. She asks if we can settle privately, if I can write a letter that clears her. She says she cannot lose her job. Her words spill fast like water backing up in a sink. I stare at the window where snow taps lightly against the glass, and I say, "The court has already decided." Then I hang up, I make tea. The steam curls up like a thin veil outside, lights gleam on the lake. The world turning as if none of the last year happened, but I know it did every second, every bruise, every receipt. I walk to the bench near the water, the wind cold on my face, but my heart steady. I think of the night Rick told me to get out, as if he were a gatekeeper, and I were a stray. And I think of the door I built for myself, with ink and evidence, and the quiet refusal to disappear. I whisper into the winter air, "You told me to get out." I walked out and built my own door. The lake answers with its endless breath waves rolling unbothered. I stand there until my fingers go numb, and then I return to my warm, small home, where peace does not have to ask for permission if you believe in quiet justice, silent revenge, emotional resilience, dignity over money, truth and closure, standing up for yourself, reclaiming respect, lesson in betrayal, justice without hate, revenge through truth. Comment still here in your state.